Okay, welcome back. We're on page 404 talking about a hybrid system. And so a hybrid system would be one of those things where I don't really have a public key where I have to attest who I am. Because if I'm a drug dealer, I don't want to use my real name, my real computer, my real organization. I want to make it all fake, okay? So basically it's like a private thing. Okay, the next thing we're going to be talking about is steganography. This is pretty cool. Technically, this is not really encryption because we're not encrypting anything. All we're doing is hiding something. So, the easiest way to do this is hide a message inside a graphic file. Okay, like a JPEG or a PNG file, and hide the message inside that. So if I'm sending out a graphic file, no one's going to look at it and go, wow, he just sent a picture of his cat. But inside the picture of a cat, it says, attack at dawn. Okay, that kind of thing. All right. So I'm going to tell you, this is kind of like a homework assignment for you. But on Canvas, so, crack up on a new one here. On Canvas, when you go to our particular class, there's a banner that goes across the top. All right, so hang on a second. Let me get there. Okay, this banner right here has an encrypted message inside it. Ooh. Your task is to be able to do a right click and save the image or copy the image right to your machine. And then what we're going to do is we're going to go to a piece of software that's going to reverse this thing. Okay, so I've brought up a web page. The URL is actually in the lecture notes. And basically it will allow you to submit this file and it'll tell you what the hidden message is inside the file. So I'm going to ask you, like on a test, what is the message that's hidden in that thing? Yeah, you're going to actually have to do this stuff. Okay, so coming up on page 405, we talk about, the protocols for secure information. If I'm trying to do like telecommunications kind of things. So, you've heard of secure socket layer, SSL. You've probably heard of HTTP and HTTPS, and there's a bunch of others. Pretty good privacy PGP, which is the one they talked about in the opening case, and there's a bunch of other these things. Okay, so let me just go through it. All right, so the internet with HTTPS and SNL. So let's just talk about something that's strange. We often use the term secure socket layer, but that's wrong because no one is using SSL anymore. The replacement is called transport layer security, TLS. Okay. So nobody is currently using that. Okay? All right, good. I still say SSL because I'm just used to saying it that way. I should say secure HTTP or HTTPS. And the technique for doing that is TLS, but that's not relevant. I should be saying HTTPS, but sometimes I don't. Okay. So let's just talk about the history. This technique of SSL was created by Netscape. And they brought it to a standards body and said, okay, here's SSL, 3, and don't you want it? And they went, yeah, okay, we'll take it, but we can't use your recognized name because, you trademarked the thing. So when you take it to a standards body, so they renamed to TLS. So at the beginning, it was just a rebranding. It's gone since then. But transport layer is the kind. So one more time, there's no version of SSL that's currently valid. So I'm just going to go to my machine here and check this thing out. So I'm going to go to the control panel and I'm going to click on something that sounds like we're talking about Internet Explorer. But there's an entire thing for Internet options, okay? And then one of the things I can talk about is security and privacy and all those kind of things. So what I'm after is advanced, and then scroll on down to what type of thing it's using. So we no longer use SSL 3, and we no longer use TLS 1 or TLS 1.1. We only allow for connections to web server using TLS 1.2 or 1.3. This is the way it should be set up. If you go to an organization and you find out they're still using SSL3, well, then I can definitely exploit you, okay? So this is clearly not something that's currently being supported. All right. So HTTPS, I mean, that's this, okay? The technique behind it is this, right? So it's just an extension to the HTTP protocol, where when you connect, it makes does a key exchange. It's similar to the Diffie-Hellman technique, and then it uses the encryption keys, and you're good to go. Did you know that when you do an SSL connection, not only do you encrypt everything to and from, but you also get that authentication piece? You know absolutely that they are who they say they are, right? So you can't just make up a web server called Microsoft.com. I make it up and then try to trick you into it, because the digital signatures are not going to match. Okay, the real one, all right? Okay, so if the digital signature doesn't match the website, alarms are going to go off and the browser won't let you do it. But here's an interesting thing. Does it work in reverse? Does the web server know exactly who I am? Yeah, isn't that pretty cool? Okay, email with secure in the beginning, they had this called MIME, and MIME stood for multi-purpose internet mail extensions, because in the very beginning of email, it was just text. But if I wanted to send a sound file or a picture or a movie, I had to have extensions that would allow me to do that. So that's what this thing is, a multi-purpose internet mail extension. And then you just do the / on there to make it so that if I want to send anything now, including text, I can encrypt the whole thing. So they have a privacy enhanced mail, PEM. I don't see much of that. PGP, which is a pretty good privacy. By the way, there's an interesting story behind this. A lot of these systems were designed by companies or established by organizations or governments, and a government body did this, the certification and all the rest of that stuff. And so if you're kind of paranoid, tinfoil hat kind of guy, maybe you want to use an encryption routine that has no government involvement whatsoever, no corporate environment, just some poor guy who wrote this thing on his own terms. PGP. Okay, PGP is a perfect way for drug suppliers to talk to drug dealers, and knowing darn well that there's no government backdoor or anything in any encryption ever. There's been an awful lot of legislatures who've been trying to get, demand that there's backdoors in encryption because it slows down, investigations of crime. And they never get very far. And the practical applications of it, the tech industry basically is saying, no. By the way, you don't vote for people because of their technical expertise, right? Okay. So sometimes they might recommend really, really stupid things. All right. So pretty good privacy. It uses Diffie-Hellman for the key exchange. And it's completely private. It's now kind of sort of open source. It's the open source version of this. And it originally was just written by one guy. And then web with SET, secure electronics. Basically, it was designed back in the day, actually before HTTPS. So I wanted to set up like a bank thing. And so just one little transaction that's going on was using this thing called SET. Basically same concept as web traffic to and from banks. And, before HTTPS, that was a pretty cool thing. Then we talk about wireless stuff. Let's say page 408. So wired equivalent privacy, WEP, a really dumb idea. It had a 40-bit key, which means you could break it in, 5-6 seconds on a modern machine? Wow. Okay, very dumb. I can see their reasoning, because at the time, computers were slow and I wanted this thing to be performant. I didn't want to have like a 200-bit key, because that would really slow down the sending and the receiving of the signal. Your wireless access point would have to have a robust, CPU and lots of memory to do all that stuff. And they wanted to keep it cheap and easy for people at home to set up these things. So in a home environment, WP, they went, that's good enough. But in a corporate environment, oh my God, no. So they replaced it with the Wi-Fi protected access, and there's different versions. WPA2, we talked about in a previous video, is pretty good. But if I send a disconnect, I can watch the handshake happen and I can attack from there. WPA3 solves that problem because, first of all, it doesn't even use a pre-shared key at all. And then when it does, all the channels are encrypted to include the channel that says I want to do a disconnect. So that's pretty cool. And then I'm going to skip some of these. IPSec, that's the new one. Okay, IPSec is probably even better and easier to operate and easier to understand than HTTPS. Why we're not using it everywhere? I don't know. Okay. So there's kind of a diagram here talking about the differences between WEP and WPA. You know, 40-bit key, you got to be kidding. Status key, same, every single person uses the exact same key. Oh my goodness. And every person is assigned a key session and then the automatic key distribution, blah, 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 blah. And WPA by itself is still crackable. 2 is crackable. 3 is holding its own. Okay, the next gen, we talk about robust secure network, RSN. So basically, the only real thing about this is they basically started out from scratch, which means there's no backwards capability. You abandon the old technique and just switch over to the new. So, rough time getting this adopted. Bluetooth. Bluetooth's been around, and it was really kind of designed to cut the cord, so to speak. It was designed so that, mice and keyboards, basically serial devices. So it wasn't very robust, and there was really no need for do I want to encrypt the message from my keyboard to my computer or from my mouse to my computer? And they were saying, no, there's no need for that. Well, okay. Then I go into a corporate world. Do I want to encrypt while I'm typing my password? Do you want the guy sitting next to me to be able to see what I'm typing? What the heck were these guys thinking? So it didn't take very long for the 2.1 that came out, where they actually took security in a serious tone. So you have any old devices before 2007 that are Bluetooth? I wouldn't use a Bluetooth keyboard or from 2007. And then securing TCP/IP. So if I'm doing web, I got it covered. Okay, I'm doing web. HTTPS using TLS solves my problem. I'm ready to move on. But is all traffic on the internet web? No. So IPSec came out, and it's to cover all the other traffic that is not related to web. So IPSec, so it's a part of the IPv6 standard. It's built in. It's not like a separate thing. So if you're using, the 128-bit addresses that IP6 provides, hopefully these terms are not totally Greek. You're nodding my head because you've taken networking courses. So it has a pretty cool scenario. So it takes, basically, here's what it would look like. And then they encapsulate, basically, just take that and just put it into another packet with all of their stuff in it. And then you send it off, it takes it all out, reproduces the packet like it's supposed to be, and sends it on. So it's very, very much, backwards compatible. In other words, the application, the one that gets this recreated thing, has no clue that it went through an encryption routine before it got there. So none of the services that exist need to even be rewritten or configured differently because it's completely transparent from their point of view. Now that's a doggone cool thing. Okay. We're coming up on the 15-minute mark. This looks like a good place to stop.